Well, shalom. My name is Todd Bennett, and this is the audio version of the weekly Shema Israel newsletter titled Stay Awake and Keep Counting. Well, this was originally published on day 20 of month 1 on the Creator's calendar, otherwise known as April 19th, 2025 on the Roman calendar. And I hope that you all experienced a very meaningful Passover and are having a wonderful feast of unleavened bread. When Yeshua observed his last Passover immediately before his crucifixion, he instructed his disciples that whenever they did it in the future, they should do it in remembrance of him. We read that in Luke 22. He said, and when the hour came, he reclined at table and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of Elohim. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of Elohim comes. And he took bread, and when he'd given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. So the question is, how are we supposed to remember Yeshua, and what exactly are we supposed to remember? Well, of course, we remember his renewal of the broken covenant during his last Passover. The unleavened bread that he broke and shared with his disciples represented his broken body. He previously told them that he was and is the bread of life, and he had to die so that we can live. And we remember that he stayed up and watched all Passover night while his disciples slept and slumbered in the garden. Yeshua was fulfilling the prophetic psalm, Behold, he who keeps or watches over Israel will neither sleep nor slumber. We remember his death on Passover Day, and we remember his resurrection on the third day after the crucifixion. His resurrection was on the seventh day of the week, the Sabbath. We also remember to count after the Passover, and we remember that Yeshua was resurrected on day 2 of the Omer count. We remember his ascension on day 41 of the Omer count, and we remember the Spirit was sent on Shabbat, day 50 of the Omer count. Now that's by no means an exhaustive list, but it gives us some important things to remember every year as we rehearse the appointed times that begin with the Passover. And how incredibly privileged we are to live in such a time when we can remember how Yeshua fulfilled so many of the prophetic patterns provided through the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. But those who follow Yeshua don't just remember past events. Since Yeshua was resurrected, that means he has been alive since his resurrection, and he is alive right now. Therefore, when we remember him, we look back at what he did and said in the past, but we also remember the present reality of his existence, and we remember the hope and the promises that we expect him to fulfill in the future. So, remembering involves much more than just recollecting. It involves an expectation of the future because our Passover lamb is alive. And that's why the text of Revelation repeatedly emphasizes Yeshua as the lamb. Consider the following from Revelation. It says, And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of Elohim, sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. Now when he'd taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints or the set-apart ones. And they sang a new song, saying, You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain and have been redeemed and have redeemed us to Elohim by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our Elohim, and we shall reign on the earth. Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them. I heard saying, Blessed and honor and glory and power be to him who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb forever and ever. Then the 4 living creatures said, Amen, and the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him who lives forever and ever. It's Revelation 5:6-14. Well, this passage describes an event in the heavenly throne room. And last week at our Passover meal, we focused on the Passover lamb, the lamb that was killed, so that we could be redeemed and spared from death. And just days ago on Omer Day 2, we then considered the risen lamb. The text of Revelation reveals that the risen lamb, what the risen lamb has accomplished and what he will accomplish. And the full text actually refers to Yeshua as the lamb 28 times. And that's a study in and of itself, and it's significant to note that the number 28 is a multiple of 7, 4 times 7. And indeed, the text of Revelation is purposefully filled with sevens, and if you've read it at all, you recognize that fact. And as the last book in the canon of scriptures, it's very pertinent to those who live in the last days. As a result, we should be paying attention to the sevens as we rehearse, especially now. For instance, today is the 7th day Sabbath, and tomorrow is the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's a high Sabbath. It commemorates the day when Israel passed through the waters of the Red Sea on dry ground, while Pharaoh and his army were later destroyed by those same waters. This entire span of the feast was about Israel being on the move. It actually took them 7 days to get out of Egypt. They didn't have time for their dough to rise, therefore they only ate unleavened bread for 7 days while they were traveling. Now thankfully, we know that Yeshua, the bread from heaven, did rise during this feast, and that's now the focus of those who believe in him. The unleavened bread reminds us of the journey out of bondage and the hope of manna that lies ahead. We've been redeemed by the blood of the risen Lamb, and did you notice in the text of Revelation who was redeemed? So those out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation. As I repeatedly try to show people, the culmination of the plan of Elohim through Messiah Yeshua involves the nations. Sadly, there are many people currently in the nations who claim to follow the Messiah, but they're not remembering properly. Instead, and they don't even do the Passover. Instead, they're celebrating the fertility rites of the Babylonian goddess named Ishtar, known as Easter. As with many of the Roman months, the month named April is associated with a pagan deity. The word April comes from the Latin word Aprilis, derived from the Greek Aphrodite. It was also called Esther Monath, the month of the fertility goddess Easter. She's the same pagan fertility goddess that the Canaanites called Esteroth. It all derives from Babylon. Of course, the reason for linking all these fertility goddesses to the month was because this was the time when new life was springing forth. And remember the definition of Abib that we often discuss around this time of the year. Again, we are in month 1, which the scriptures describe as the month of the Abib. And it really just means the month when new life is springing forth and the month of spring. And that's why Yah scheduled his Passover and his Feast of Unleavened Bread during the month of the Abib. We celebrate these appointed times when new life is made possible by Yeshua through the resurrection. The renewed covenant is what leads to new life for all those in the covenant, and that's why we celebrate Passover and not the pagan celebration of Easter. And it's important to remember that Yeshua was resurrected on the Sabbath, not Easter Sunday, as I've already mentioned. While Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are almost past us, for those in the renewed covenant, our journey has just begun. Again, Israel was traveling the entire time of 7 days. It was not until the 7th day that they actually left Egypt when they crossed the Red Sea, but they still had an appointment to keep at the mountain of Elohim in the land of Midian. They were on a schedule, and that schedule involved a specific count that leads us to the next feast in the schedule of appointed times, Shabbat, which is oftentimes also called Shavuot, and in Christianity they call it Pentecost. So keeping time and counting was important to the ancient Israelites, and it's very important to us if we want to diligently follow Yahweh. Read what this psalm has to say. It says, "The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength we are 80 years. Yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to count our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Yahweh, how long? And have compassion on your servants. O satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days in which you have afflicted us, the years in which we have seen evil. Let your work appear to your servants and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of Yahweh our Elohim be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. When I first started walking according to the Torah over 25 years ago, I was told that birthday celebrations derived from Babylon and were bad. While there may be some traditions that derive from Babylon, there's nothing wrong with keeping track of your age, and we wouldn't have any genealogies if people didn't count their years. In fact, we should thank Elohim at the passage of every year for the gift of life and the opportunity to continue to serve him. So we should be asking Yahweh to teach us how to count our days. The Hebrew word for count is manah, which also means number. And notice that this request takes place in the context of understanding the fear of Yahweh, and as a request for compassion, nacham, and mercy, chesed. And that's what we want in these tumultuous times, where we can sense his judgment and wrath looming on the horizon. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to lose track of time in this hectic world that we live in? It goes by fast for sure, and in the same psalm that we didn't read, but earlier in the passage, we are told, "For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night." Now that's interesting that it would mention a watch in the night, because each individual night watch is typically only 3 hours long, and to a tired person, though, standing in the dark watching out for the enemy, those hours can go by incredibly slow. They can seem like an eternity. During this last Passover, by the time of the fourth watch, I could barely keep my eyes open. I couldn't wait for sunrise. You really want time to fly during a night watch, but I cannot fathom 1,000 years passing by that fast. Well, that's how Yahweh perceives time, because he's outside of time, which is a dimension that our containers of flesh are tied to. And that's why we need to stay focused on time. He placed us within time for a reason, and he purposefully established time and a calendar for us to learn about him and his ways. Of course, this is all an exercise to prepare us for the future, and Yeshua gave a very specific warning regarding preparedness and being on time. Read what happens to the 5 virgins who show up too late for the wedding. In Matthew 25, it says, "Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, 'Behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him.' Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'No, lest there should not be enough for us and you. But go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves.' And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open up to us.' But he answered and said, 'Assuredly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming.'" Well, while we know that all 10 virgins slept and slumbered, they awoke when they heard the midnight cry. Midnight is between the second and third watch. So they all slept, and they all were awakened, and they all had lamps. The problem with the 5 foolish virgins is that they didn't have oil to keep their lamps lit for the journey. They were unprepared. If they had only kept watch, counted the days and the hours, and rehearsed as if they would see a fulfillment, then they would have been among the wise. That's why I suggest people keep a go bag ready at Passover with a flashlight and extra batteries. It makes the rehearsal real and relevant, and it helps us it helps to get us in the right mindset. Now, I like to use an oil menorah for feasts, and a good friend of mine just gifted me a very large one at Passover. It has large cups that can contain enough oil to burn throughout the night, and I have a smaller one that can only hold enough oil to burn a couple hours. And the lesson is that you need to have a large enough vessel with sufficient oil to keep the lamp burning through the night. Otherwise, you'll find yourself left in the dark. And this parable of the 10 virgins was one of the final teachings that Yeshua gave, and I believe that it's highly significant for this generation. Indeed, Psalm 90 says, "Teach us to count our days for a specific purpose, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And that was the distinguishing factor between the wise and the foolish virgins. They were all virgins desiring to attend the wedding. The ones admitted were described as wise. So counting is important, and that's why Yahuwah gives us simple exercises like counting days. Today is Shabbat, day 7. We can only get to the place of rest if we count to 7. And tomorrow we restart that count as we begin another week, and we continue this counting to 7 our entire lives, and it's that important. As I previously mentioned, tomorrow is day 7 of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Again, a feast that lasts 7 days reinforces the significance of 7. Now, we're also in the midst of an exercise referred to as the counting of the Omer that involves the counting of 7 sevens as we move toward the Feast of Weeks. The Hebrew word for weeks is Shabbat. In Deuteronomy 16:9-10, it says, "You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to Yahuwah your Elohim, with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as Yahuwah your Elohim blesses you." If 7 is important, then I can hardly imagine the significance of 7 sevens. It clearly points to the greater count of 7 sevens that lead to the Jubilee. Regardless, so many people neglect or ignore the specific command to count. Do you know what day it is in the count, or did you lose track? Did you even start the count, or how do you know when to begin the count? Well, this exercise is one of the toughest for people to understand because it's very subtle. It continues quietly behind the scenes as we go about our daily lives. There's no party or meal that goes along with it every day, except for at the very end when we finally complete the count to the 50th day at the Feast of Shabbat. Otherwise, it's just a simple daily exercise of counting. I've written an article titled, "When Do We Celebrate Shabbat?" That you might find helpful concerning when to begin the count and when to celebrate Shabbat. This year, the Feast of Shabbat, also known as the Day of First Fruits, will land on day 6 of month 3, June 3rd, 2025. If you're listening to this and you want to get to the article, you can just go to the website shemayisrael.net and go to the article section. It should be there for you to grab. Well, clearly there's something important about the number 7, so we should give special attention to the counting of 7 sevens that actually connects 2 feasts together. The count spans the grain harvest between the first barley offering to the first fruits of the wheat. What begins with simple matzah culminates with leavened loaves of wheat bread. In fact, this period of time is the setting for much of the story of Ruth, which provides an amazing prophetic picture for the foreigner joining with Israel. Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi, described as better than 7 sons. There's that 7 again. And the story culminates with a wedding and the birth of Obed, the grandfather of King David. Well, there's so much more to say about this time and the significance of the number 7, Consider the text of Revelation 5 that I quoted above concerning the Lamb in the throne room. Can you see all the sevens embedded just within that scene? There's some that you might not even notice right off. And so maybe next week I'll discuss that more. The entire text of Revelation is filled with sevens. And of course, the emphasis of sevens in the revelation given to John also carries over to the good news according to John, which is entirely framed around 7 specific signs that Yeshua gave. Well, in a future message during the counting of weeks, I hope to further explore the emphasis on the number 7 in the text of Revelation and John. For now, I pray that none of us fall asleep or slumber during the count. Remember that all 10 virgins desired to attend the wedding, but only 5 of them made it in. If you understand how to count to Shabbat and you keep sufficient oil in your vessels, you will be numbered among the wise, and you will make it to the wedding. So make sure to stay awake and keep counting. Shabbat Shalom and Hag Sameach. This is Todd Bennett from ShemaYisrael.net. And as a final note, many years ago I did a quick teaching in Jerusalem at a Tammuz cave where traditional Easter sunrise services would have taken place. If you want to know what Easter is really about, check out the video on my YouTube channel titled, Should Christians Celebrate Easter? And if you have any friends or family that still insist upon observing Easter, you may want to send that link to them so they just get a little taste of what it's about. So I hope you enjoyed this message. If you have watched this on YouTube, or if you get it forwarded to you from somebody else, you can go to the ShemaYisrael.net website, and it gives you an opportunity to click and sign up. It's a free newsletter. You don't have to pay for it. So, and I pretty much send it out every Shabbat. And so if you want to be directly on the website or on the list, just go to the website and sign up. Okay, until next week, Shalom.